the nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors these broadcasts. I'm also chairman of the coalition to block the North American Union, and it's in that capacity that I am today broadcasting from Guadalajara, Mexico, where I was present for the so-called North American Leaders Summit with Felipe Calderon, the President of Mexico, Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister of Canada, and Barack Hussein Obama, the President of the United States. We're pleased to have as our guest for this broadcast Tom Marshall, a journalist with the Guadalajara Reporter, an English-language newspaper which caters to Americans and others who have retired near Guadalajara. Tom is a native of the United Kingdom, but he has been here for some time now. He was educated in Canada and in other places as well. And Tom, we thank you
thanks for having me.
Taking the time to be with us. And we're going to let you teach us about Mexico. Tell us about Mexican politics. As I understand it, there are two principal Mexico political parties, the PAN, P-A-N,
yep,
and the PRI, P-R-I. Tell us about them.
Well, Felipe Calderon is from the PAN party, and who recently in the midterm election on July the 5th, they got absolutely slaughtered all over Mexico. So now, for what remains of his...
The PANs got slaughtered?
Yeah, slaughtered, completely slaughtered.
Why?
Most pundits say that it was the economy. I think the drugs war is probably one of the reasons as well. It's like people compare it to like stirring a hornet's nest with what he's been doing. So the PRI are back after I think 73 years they were in power.
Yeah, it was very unusual for Calderon to win.
Yeah. And
his election was disputed by whom?
By the PRD, which is the more left-wing party.
And the candidate of the PRD was, if I'm correct, the former mayor of Mexico City?
Yep, he's called Andrés Manuel López Obrador. And I mean, people thought it was quite similar to 1988 in Mexico, when a guy called Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, he lost, and there was a problem with the machines in counting the votes. Most people think that he actually won in '88, and a similar thing in 2006, I think. But it's one of those things in Mexican politics where I don't think you'll actually ever find out, because who's going to find out? Who's going to investigate it?
Now, it was quite a while before the quote-unquote loser conceded the election.
Yeah.
Ultimately, why did he concede?
I don't think he has ever really conceded. He's actually never conceded. He still considers himself to be the legitimate president of Mexico. He still goes around, he still does tours of the country in his capacity as the legitimate president, as he calls himself. Now I think what's happened since then is the PRD, the more left-wing party, they've actually really suffering now, and they did terribly in the last midterm elections in Mexico, and they've got a real struggle in the next 2 years, 4 years, 3 years, for the next Mexican election, to get themselves together, else there's not going to be any left-wing opposition.
Now, in the United States, although the Republicans and Democrats wind up supporting many of the same things, there are perceived differences between the Republicans and the Democrats. How would you define the policies of the three countries, three parties?
My perspective is between the PAN and the PRI. You know, I've been here some time now, and I can't distinguish too much between the two. Now, I know the PAN is supposed to be more associated with the Catholic Church, especially here in Jalisco and near Guadalajara. The PRI, obviously, it kind of swings and roundabouts, you know. It's like, even when they were ruling for 73 years, they were always like sometimes left, sometimes right, and they changed as they went. Now I think they're pretty much centrist, and I think if you just the difference between the two, the PAN would probably be more right. Now the PRD is kind of workers' party. It's very much of the left wing, and it represents the left wing in Mexico. Now the problem with the left wing now in Mexico is it's split. It's completely split between those who still support López Obrador, and those who want a new option.
And is participation in Mexican politics widespread? Is it intense? Do most people care about it and take part in it?
Most people care about it, I think. I think, just this is from my personal experience, people, maybe they know the name of the candidate, maybe they know the party. I mean, and I used, I've just my friends and the people I know here, like, who obviously went to vote in the recent midterms, and it's like, who are you going to vote for and why? And actually people I don't think they know what the candidates stand for. I think it's very much, politics has become very much watered down in a way. It's like it's a media campaign in that respect, in Mexico as well.
In the United States, a lady of Puerto Rican heritage, Sonia Sotomayor, was confirmed to be a justice of the United States Supreme Court. And she was an officer of an organization called La Raza Unida. One of the policies supported by key members of La Raza Unida was Aztlan, the idea that the United States should return to Mexico key elements of the Southwest, including Arizona, New Mexico, California, Colorado, etc. Does that idea have much sympathy among the Mexican people?
Most Mexican people know the history and what happened with the land and with Santa Anna and with Texas.
Is General Santa Anna a hero?
I wouldn't say he's a hero. Most people they know the other side to him as well, and he was terrible. He was, as a Mexican president, he was terrible, and as a general. But I mean, I don't think it's got any. People would more say that as a joke, like, oh, we.
So there's not. It's not a political issue. The political parties do not call for the return of the Southwest to Mexico.
No, I think they've moved way beyond that kind of assertion. Maybe the people in the U.S., the Mexicans in the U.S. feel that more because they're there, and maybe they have a different perspective as the Mexicans here. The Mexicans here, I don't think they're going to be invading anytime soon.
Do many Mexicans know or remember the history of Pancho Villa and Woodrow Wilson's sending of troops into Mexico to capture Pancho Villa?
I think so, yeah. I mean, if you go to certain tourist places around the area here, you can actually buy posters, and it says, Pancho Villa, reward, you reward for his capture with a certain amount of dollars. I can't remember how much. But yeah, it's still, I mean, you can go and buy him now, even today. So I think it's still part of the, still resonates.
At one time, the Mexican government was very anti-clerical.
Yeah.
And the dominant religion in Mexico is Catholicism. And the government of Mexico did everything it could to quell Catholic influence. What is the policy now of the government of Mexico toward religion, toward the Catholic Church in particular?
Well, I mean, officially the Church and the States and the state is completely separate entities. Now, I think more, within Mexican politics, especially in Jalisco, I'm not sure outside Jalisco, but especially in Jalisco, many people think that the PAN and the Church are very, very highly linked. Now, how much is that true? How much you can prove that? Who knows? But officially, the state and the Church are separate. Where the influence comes, I think, is more in the culture. Most of the politicians are Catholic as well. You know what I mean? So they want to put forward policies that are in line with their specific ideals.
And one of the things that I've observed with my limited knowledge of Mexico is that Mexican culture is still very conservative. You do not have the kind of sympathy for perverse sexual conduct in Mexico that there is in the United States. There is a wonderful hostility to abortion. One cannot walk the streets without seeing numerous pregnant women. I think that's wonderful, that the people of Mexico love their families and they love having children.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the generational thing. Actually, I think the American influence or the outside influence is changing that.
It's negative.
And I think especially, I don't know if it's negative. It's definitely changing it though, and especially within the cities. I mean, this is another thing about Mexico. It's like there's a great difference between people who live and are from a city like Guadalajara, which is, you know, it's a massive city.
What is the population of Guadalajara from which we're now broadcasting?
I think it's 5 or 6 million. Now it's difficult because of the different zones. It's a big city. It's a big city. Now, if you're from Guadalajara or you're from a little small town 2 hours away, a small town 2 hours away will have a much more traditional outlook. You know, you still get a central square in the town where I think it's Sunday, the young girls or the young guys, or whatever, they call it doing a circle, and they circle around the square, and when they like the girl or they want to talk, you know, it's very traditional, very kind of like very traditional. But here, more and more, it's being eroded. That
very interesting. Tom Marshall, we're going to take a break.
Okay, no problem.
And we'll be right back after these messages with Tom Marshall, a journalist in Guadalajara, born in Manchester, England, educated in Canada, and sharing his views of Mexico with us.
You are a defender of liberty. You spoke out.
That is part of your job.
You were heard in Congress.
No.
You marched. You created a new movement. You endured attacks.
You see folks waving tea bags around.
Now you can help to
Repeal the bill.
Go to sendthemaMessage.com. Print the pledge to repeal Obamacare. Send it to your representative, senators, and candidates to sign that they pledge to
repeal the bill. Repeal the bill.
Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill. Repeal the bill.
Repeal the bill. Now.
Go to sendthemaMessage.com and help.
Repeal the bill.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus and head of the coalition to block the North American Union. And our guest is Tom Marshall, a journalist with the Guadalajara Reporter, if I correctly
that's right.
recounted that. Talk to us, Tom, about the impact of swine flu in Mexico.
Swine flu. Well, it was economically absolute disaster. Like, you know, pretty much everything was closed. It was like, even Guadalajara for a week was like a ghost town. And Mexico City was even worse. I think the biggest effect was the economy. Restaurants are still shutting now. Hotels are shutting because they just can't deal with it. They've not recovered.
How many victims were there?
I'm not sure. In Jalisco, there's so far been 11 deaths in this state. In Mexico, I'm not sure of the numbers.
You use the word state. How many states are there in Mexico?
I think there are 49 or 50, including Mexico.
Sort of like the U.S.
Yeah, similar amount.
When I arrived at the airport in Guadalajara, I was given a mask.
Yeah? Oh, it's still. And it's supposed to be rebounding, that's why they say it's rebounding swine flu. Yeah.
What is the general attitude toward NAFTA of the Mexican people?
I think most Mexicans are in support of anything that helps them economically. The Mexican economy is still very divided, and but you get incidents like what happened with the tortillas, where you get imports coming from the US, which are actually more cheaper than the Mexican produce, and so therefore the Mexican producers are losing out. and these people, don't. That's their only source of income.
Was NAFTA an issue in the recent midterm elections?
I think slightly, the renegotiation, and Obama said, I think President Calderon is completely against the renegotiation. He just, he wants it to keep going. Obviously, he thinks Mexico's doing well by it.
What about education in Mexico? Is there such a thing as a typical education for Mexican youths?
I think it's from what I know about, it's very split. I mean, if you go to a normal state school, government-sponsored school, then it's not very good, to put it bluntly. Now, if you've got private university, you've got private schools, which a lot of them are bilingual, and they're very good, very good.
And in the United States, it is said that to get a good job, you have to have a college education.
Yeah.
Is that similar here?
Yeah, I think it's similar. I mean, unless if you don't have that, título, they call it in Spanish, from a university here, then you're not going to be able to get a decent job having any kind of responsibility, because employers won't give it you.
Drugs are a big problem in Mexico, and the United States is a contributor to the problem, because drug users in the United States create the demand for drugs that are smuggled in from Mexico, and that are contributing factors to the drug wars in Mexico.
Yeah.
What is the government doing to deal with the drug problem?
I mean, they've sent thousands and thousands of troops to what they call the drug hotspots, which is like Ciudad Juarez. You just recently to Michoacan, which is the neighboring state to here. And I think, from the Mexican perspective, like the people, they're right. They know very well where the drugs are going. They know they're going to the U.S. They know the consumers are there, and so I think a lot of Mexicans do lay responsibility there, and not only for the drugs, because 90% of the guns that are used for killing Mexican on Mexican come from the U.S. And Mexicans are quite, from my perspective, from what I know, are very aware of that.
Well, wouldn't people who use guns to commit crimes be able to get them one way or another, whatever the source?
I mean, who knows? But I mean, when there's a very easy way of getting it down across the U.S. border, then it's
I
a lot easier.
I thought there were rules against it that make it very difficult for guns to cross the border.
Yeah, apparently, a few months ago there was they talked about it. I think Clinton was here in Puerto Vallarta, and they said, the Americans are going to help stop the guns coming down, and the Mexicans are going to put more. They're going to reinforce their border for people coming down from the U.S. into Mexico, which hardly, at the minute there isn't much.
Of course, Clinton and Obama and Mrs. Clinton reject the constitutional guarantees which Americans enjoy of the right to keep and bear arms, which are used not just for hunting, but for self-defense. When it's better for government to fear the people than for people to fear the government. And as long as you have a well-armed public, there are limits to what government will do to harass the people. What about taxes in Mexico? Are taxes high?
Taxes are quite high, yeah. I'm not exactly sure the figures. I mean, the difference in Mexico is the amount of employment, which is completely just not, you can't record it. For example, if someone's washing your window and that's what they do as a job, that's informal economy, and so obviously they don't pay taxes. So it's very hard to get a state that's running with fluency because of that.
What is the official tax rate?
I'm not sure. I couldn't say.
What about Mexico's relations with other countries? Recently, I noticed a dispute had developed between Mexico and Canada about visa policy. Explain that.
Yeah, apparently more and more Mexicans over the last about 5 years were claiming asylum in Canada for being persecuted for homosexuality, and also an increasing amount from the drugs war. And I mean, Canada had a policy where if a Mexican turned up there and said that they were being persecuted, then Canada would take them in. And in these cases took about 1.5 years to process. And in that time, the Mexicans got, welfare, and a place to stay.
Now, one of the unwise decisions made by the American Congress is to limit drilling for oil in the Gulf of Mexico. But even as we limit ourselves in America, the Russians and the Cubans are drilling for oil in the Gulf of Mexico. And what is the nature of the oil industry in Mexico?
I think it's going through a transition phase. I mean, obviously, even since the 1930s, oil's been very, very, it was nationalized by Cárdenas, and the Americans weren't happy. Maybe the Americans at that time couldn't do anything. Now we're arriving at a stage where I think Mexico, obviously still owned by the government, but I think Calderon wants to explore options. Now he's allowing partnerships with Pemex, which is the government-owned company.
You can find a Pemex gas station
everywhere,
on every corner.
I mean, that's the only one there is.
Yeah.
You can't find any others. That's why the price of gas here is high.
It's a monopoly.
Yeah, it's a monopoly. It's a government-owned company. But I think Calderon, if he had his way, would privatize to some degree Pemex. And
Mexico has a military. I was watching television last night, and they had the Secretary of Defense on television.
Yeah.
Is the purpose of the Mexican military to defend Mexico from the United States or from some other foe?
I think it's to defend Mexico from itself. More like, at the minute, it's the drugs. The drugs war. I mean, the drugs war is probably the number one issue for Mexicans at the minute. Apart from the economy, but I mean, every country is going through the economic crisis. Whereas the drugs war for Mexicans, I mean, potentially it's got the potential to do a hell of a lot of damage. Now,
one thing that has outraged many Americans and undermined the spirit of friendship which Americans have for Mexico is military incursions by Mexican troops into our country, the United States, over the border. Another thing which has greatly upset people has been pictures of, at sports events, Mexicans celebrating the Mexican flag and booing the American flag.
Yeah.
Is that just an isolated situation?
I mean, to be quite honest, I think that's more of very specific to the US. You know what I mean? Obviously, there's always a traditional rivalry between US and Mexico, and obviously Mexico, gringos.
But the Mexicans in the United States still consider themselves more Mexican than American.
Than Americans, yeah. But I mean, I don't know how many of them, if you asked them, if you did a survey, would prefer to be in Mexico. Because my perspective is the majority would prefer to be in Mexico. They're only in the US for economic reasons.
They like the money they get in the US, but they want to send it back to their family, and they're lonesome when they're separate from their family.
Yeah, and I think that's also very sad.
One of the good things about Mexico is the strong history of family values. It's very impressive. It's very good. It's one of the country's great strengths. Tom, we have to take another break. We'll be back with some closing comments from Tom Marshall following these brief messages. Please stay with us.
Hi, I'm Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee's 7th Congressional District. Just as you hear every couple of years, this is an important election. And I think for those of us who are conservatives, this is indeed a very crucial election. Everything's on the ballot, and this is one of those years to show up and be counted and make your conservative voice heard. Whether it is reducing federal spending, reducing the size of the bureaucracy, or securing our border. These are issues that are of primary importance to us. And I hope that all of our conservatives are going to show up and vote to protect faith, family, freedom, hope, and opportunity.
Welcome back. Thanks for watching Conservative Roundtable, sponsored by the Conservative Caucus. If you're interested in the kinds of issues we discuss on Roundtable, I hope that you will check out our website, www.conservativeusa.org. or you can drop me a note at 450 Maple Avenue East, Vienna, Virginia, 22180, care of TCC, the Conservative Caucus. We've been privileged to have as our guest for this broadcast, which is being taped in Guadalajara, Mexico, the distinguished journalist Tom Marshall, top reporter for the Guadalajara Reporter. Tom, if people want to subscribe to the Guadalajara Reporter so they can learn more about the kinds of things we've discussed, how can they do that?
The best way is through the website, which is at www.guadalajarareporter.com. And yeah, we're always covering kind of, Mexican-U.S. issues from the perspective of this side of the border.
And for those of our viewers who do not speak Spanish, they can still enjoy your newspaper because it's written in English.
Yep, I think it's only one of two main English language newspapers based in Mexico.
Do you enjoy living here?
Yeah, very much so. It's completely different style of life, but I mean...
what is it that you prefer here to that which you experienced in England and Canada?
More life, the people on the street, people are very, very friendly. There's always things going on. Because one friend, if you know one friend, you know 100 friends.
So it's a country of communities.
Definitely. That's probably the best thing about Mexico.
Yeah. Well, in the brief time that I've been here in Guadalajara, I'm impressed. I've enjoyed it. It's a big city.
Yeah.
Bigger than most Americans would realize. 4 million, 5 million people.
Yeah.
Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
Problem.
And
pleasure to be
best
here.
wishes in your career.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching Conservative Roundtable.